right, so welcome to the inaugural episode of I Didn't Read Your Book. Today we are going to be talking to John Anderson about his book, The Price of Salvation. But before we bring him in, let's read the back of the book. An old-fashioned telling of an outlaw in the West. The Price of Salvation follows Thomas St. Hart and his gang, the brother of Baudelaire. I'm going to have to ask for clarification on that pronunciation. As they face the deadly odds of modernization and are forced to pick between the sides of good and evil in order to attain their freedom. Thomas's choice, learning more towards the likes of God, results in an epic journey across a small section of Arizona to save the few remaining Christians left in the West, while being hunted by his former allies who chose the path of evil, led by none other than Lucius Baudelaire, Thomas's father figure. Morty in the background, that's going to happen. Set in 1902, this thrilling tale of outlaws and men of faith has been called a whetstone western, a faith-based western designed to sharpen the mind and symbolic sword of the faithful, with its themes of freedom, faith, and family. With its themes of freedom, faith, and family, oh my God, family, particularly relevant today, this book brings us to question the very idea of law and order in our time, the concept of freedom, and what is truly free, and the price we all must pay in order to attain it, especially when our families are all on the line. All of these things are the price of salvation. I promise I will get better at reading on camera as time goes on, but usually I would say I want to do a little segment about the author, but here it says about the author, John Anderson is a storyteller. So I guess we'll let him tell us. Other than that, judging the book by its cover, it's a nice little cover. It's got it seems that as an atheist, it was just a coincidence that this first episode is with Christian work. It just so happened that the first person who reached out and was available was a Christian author. Now, those of you who know already know how adamantly atheist I am, but that's not what this show is. This is for me to learn about John's book, and for you to learn about it, for us to learn about it. What is it all about? What does he have to say? And let's get to it. All right, and here we welcome John Anderson, our author for this week. And so I went to do the back of the book, and we did that. And then I went to about the author, and it says, John Anderson is a storyteller. Cool. So tell me a story. How did you, tell me how you got into writing this book, or what sparked this idea, or where did this all begin?
Sure, yeah. So The Price of Salvation initially kicked off as a small concept. I was sitting in my living room at my old house, and there was a Western playing on the TV, and I had seen this scene where I think it was either John Wayne or Clint Eastwood, I can't remember, but he was talking with this guy, and they're having this old Western banter back and forth, and I was like, I remember seeing that, and I go, man, that'd make a cool story for a Western where I don't know what, like that. And that's really how all of my ideas kind of start off, is just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have this vision. And usually back then what it would be like I'd actually see an image of like a scene. And at the time I was writing scripts. So I would see like an image for a scene. And in that scene, I would be like, okay, so I have this character. He's dressed in all black. He's riding on a black horse, and this bounty hunter walks up on him and points his rifle. And that was the scene that I saw. And the banter they exchanged back and forth was much like the banter that I had seen in the movie, which is just something along the lines of like, you better stop right there, friend, because one more step and you'll have a bullet in your back, And then the
classic Clint Eastwood type.
Yeah. That was more like John Wayne, but yeah, for Clint Eastwood. Then the other guy would come around and with Clint Eastwood be like, Are you sure you're the one, or I'm the one who'll have a bullet in my back?
That's actually, so let me ask you about that, because I really know, my parents are not from this country. I was, my siblings and I are, I'm sorry, the fucking landscapers are here today. We probably should have done this another day, but yeah.
So your dog's real excited to see him.
Oh, he's loving it. No respect for the platform. But yeah, so my parents, I don't really have a strong connection to, like American history or that part of American history, country music, that whole thing. Like I said, my parents are both immigrants. My siblings and I were born here, but a lot of that, I mean, and I'm talking generally, like a lot of just 70s, 80s pop culture in general, I just didn't absorb through my parents, but specifically the Westerns, the spaghetti Western. What is the difference between a John Wayne and a Clint Eastwood?
Like, what's the difference? Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
honestly, they're both kind of the same, but it's mostly like the style that's different. So like it's like the minor things in a Clint Eastwood type of style Western, which is what you'd call a spaghetti Western. But like one thing that definitely signifies this is a spaghetti Western is that most of the dialogue was said in Italian, and then it was dubbed over in English. And so that's why when you notice sometimes like their mouths won't match up with the words that they say. And that's because some lines, or like almost all of them in some of the spaghetti Westerns, were dubbed over in English. And the reason why that was because the directors and the people who were working on the films, they were all Italian men and women. And so that's really the biggest difference. Now, a John Wayne Western is made by Americans, like for Americans. It's the classic Western spirit of America that is that's solidified in the West in a period of our history that is relatively forgotten these days. But most people know, like if you think about it, generally speaking, that's probably the John Wayne movie. So like, cowboy walks into a bar and everybody stops and stares at him, and he goes up to the bar. Yeah, like, yeah,
yeah, that's what I thought. Yep.
Yeah, like that's the classic John Wayne American Western. And the spaghetti Westerns would be more like, three, like the good and the bad and the ugly, like three guys, they all come together, and it's got a little more artistic style to it. It's not necessarily just a straightforward, like, here's your good guy, John Wayne, and here's your bad guy, random bad guy dude. In the good and bad, the ugly, you have like all three of them are kind of like, you have like this soldier, and he's like, he seems like he's kind of a good guy, but you don't really know. And then you have this bad guy who's like relatively known for being a pretty big killer and an outlaw. And then you have the ugly, who's like this disgusting thief, like he's just the scum of the earth. And they all three come together to find this treasure. And so it's got a little more class to it, a little more just other. It's like an other world view of the American culture's Western. And so it made for this really cool and really unique thing that has never been done before. And so that's the basic difference. My book, I would say that I definitely kind of dabble in both. It's got a very basic setup as far as like, there's a good guy and he's going to try to do the good guy thing. But I definitely dabble more in the spaghetti Western era because that's really what I grew up on mostly. I've definitely seen more Clint Eastwood than John Wayne.
So again, coming from an outside perspective, I guess on both counts, how does your religion play into this? Because as those who don't know me from before, I am as I said in the earlier segment, I am a staunch atheist, but this is a very different show than All Really Was. We're not really here to get into that. I want to just hear about the book. We might dabble into a little bit, but so how exactly does the religion play into, to recap again, we read the back of the book. And so the main character is looking to save all the Christians, and his former comrades have taken the side of evil. Basically got that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. And just to preface, I want to say I actually hate the back of my book. because here's what happened, and I feel bad because I'm kind of throwing my publishing company under the dust, but under the bus. But here's what happened. So just a quick story. They told me, they were like, just write a quick summary of what is going to happen in your book, and then we're going to send it to our guy, and our guy is going to spice it up, and he's going to make it awesome, and he's going to like put all his cool twists on it, make it really good to sell to the people. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I just put some quick summary, like literally what you read on the back of the book. Okay, that was what I wrote. And I was like, here's my quick summary of all these things this guy can put together and make a lot better than I'm writing now. Send, right? And so I saw it come back, and it wasn't. It was just what I wrote initially. And I was like, what is this? Like, this isn't.
You're going to spice it up.
Yeah, I was like, this is horrible. And so,
like, well, there's pretty colors.
Funny. What's that?
I said, hey, there's pretty colors.
Yeah, and then, that's also great, amazing work of the graphic designer. Sadly, I wish that she could have done the words too. But yeah, so funny story. It's horribly described in my personal opinion, but maybe that'll grab people's attention. But now that story's
been now we're giving you the floor, so straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. You can hear it from me and get the actual inside scoop of what the back is supposed to say.
So real quick, sorry to interrupt you. I want to make sure. So Thomas St. Hart is the protagonist, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the gang is called the Brothers of the Boudiclair.
Yeah, the Brothers of Boudiclair. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's our two sides. So what happens with Thomas and the Boudiclair? Yeah.
Okay. So I'm kind of a stickler for spoilers, so I'm going to be as vague but as specific as I can.
Ooh, because it's part of
the adventure. Yeah, you got to read it and go through the adventure because there's lots of twists. There's a lot of stuff people won't see.
Right. But I didn't read the book, and that's the show. I'm assuming the audience didn't read the book. Maybe some of them have, but bring us in. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so Thomas. So basically, we pick up with Thomas, who's he's just the same as any other outlaw that you've probably ever heard of. He's a murderer, a thief, the general scum of the earth, as they would say. And he's introduced into his world through his family, who would be the Brothers of Baudiclair, which is kind of a funny name because it's not just a bunch of men. There's actually, I think, three women as a part of the gang too. And there's a little funny joke about that in the book, but I'll let the book tell it because they'll probably tell it a lot better than I will. But so he's introduced into this world at a very, very young age. And that's all that he knows. It's not like one of those things where like he joined when he was like 20, it was fully cognizant of what he was doing and he made that choice. It was more like, this is the life that I was just born into. I have no choice but to stick with it. It's all I've ever known. And this is what it is. Unfortunately for Thomas and the rest of the Brothers of Baudiclair, it comes at a time of 1902. And 1902, at least in my book, is where the pinnacle of modernization begins to happen in the West. So the outlaws of the time are almost all extinct. As much as there's little Christians that remain in the West, there's very little outlaws that remain as well. And so the Brothers of Baudiclair are kind of like this final group of people that are of this time that is no more. And so
I'm trying to put my finger on that and put into context. Okay, what was happening in 1902? Just generally that we can think of. I guess. So what was going on around that time? That was the turn of the century. So I mean, it was a little bit before a little bit after the Industrial Revolution, right?
Yeah. So basically in the West, around this time, what we had was, first of all, the Civil War had ended a few years back, actually, by a couple of 10 years back.
Yeah.
And the Civil War was over. And what was happening was the West was becoming this area of kind of like safe haven in a sense for literally anybody. And so then you have the Industrial Revolution coming in. So you have like two polar opposites of society. We have the American West, which is wooden towns in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, that nobody knows about. People out here don't even exist as far as the rest of the country is concerned. And I'm pretty sure at the time they were all just still territories. So they weren't even really like considered, these are a part of the United States. They were going to be, they were on the verge of like basically becoming that by title, but they were still considered territories. So it was like a lawless land for a vast majority of the time. And so you have New York, who is like giant buildings and rich linens of clothing and like all these wonderful, amazing things. And then you have the West, which is literally just like Dust Bowl in the middle of nowhere. And so it became this mixing pot of people, of from different backgrounds, walks of life as well. Like I said, most people that fought in the Civil War, they actually went to the West because it was a place where they could kind of just settle down. Most who survived anyway, could kind of just like settle down and go about their ways. But so then you have, yeah, and so it's and there's a lot about the West. It's just rich in history of things that you're like, wow, I did not know that. The railroad, okay, the railroad was a huge movement for the U.S. because it allowed for modernization to fully take over. So the U.S. government could transport mass amounts of supplies and tools to and from these areas that were relatively untouched. And so you have the railroad that made a huge difference in the West, and that's actually where my book kind of takes place. It kind of takes place in the middle of that. So you have I'm going to call them the cavalry, but I don't think they're called that. But it's basically the U.S. government, which is the men in blue uniforms, like going through and putting more law and order into the land. More
Establishment.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like they have these forts everywhere that are being built, and it's not just free roam anymore. It's not just free land. There's U.S. government soldiers, and the sheriffs are becoming more weaponized, and they're getting more hostile, and they're cracking down on outlaws, and they're making it the American territories, and they're making it the American United States, as opposed to just some territory out there where anybody could have a gun and shoot someone.
And so this all precedes Thomas's story, or is this okay? So all this is going on, and what? So I guess what I'm asking, firstly, is what if you had to, if there was one thing that you wanted someone to take away from this story, in the context of, hey, this is I'm taking history and I'm taking religion and I'm putting together and I'm giving you X.
Yeah, okay, so that's actually a great loophole back, or a great pullback, because so religion, how does the religion aspect of it play into the whole story? I definitely wish the back would have been more subtle with it, because the book is incredibly subtle with it. They're like, Thomas decides to serve God and move the Christians across the states. I'm like, that's not what happens, but but you know, I mean, thank you for saying that that's a main aspect. And so, and I shouldn't say that's not what happens. It's more like I said, it's a lot more subtle. And the way and that's really how I do it. So as far as America is concerned, the Christian faith or religion was a very prominent factor in its founding, and it remained that way for a vast majority of its history. But that doesn't really play into the world here, because the world that I create is this world where God is almost like this figmental entity that exists in a world where people are hopeless, where things are hard, where times are tough. And in a lot of senses, there's people who believe, and I'm putting air quotes in the air for those who are on the podcast, there's people who believe, air quotes, and then there's people who actually believe. And those people are near extinct. And so the aspect of the religion in it, and my biggest goal, my biggest takeaway for this book is, what is the price of salvation? That question, and then the answer should be at the end of the book. You can put yourself in any one of the shoes. And the thing is that, so let's take, for example, Thomas. It makes him sound like he's like, oh, this Bible thumping Christian. He's not in any way, shape, or form. He wasn't raised into that. He doesn't know any of that. As far as he's concerned, he has some idea of like, I'm sure there has to be a God out there somewhere. I would believe that, but he doesn't have any wisdom or any knowledge or teachings on the matter.
So he would be more in the quote unquote believer.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's more in the like, yeah, I believe. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering how just that little piece of there being the quote unquote believers and then the believers, how that relates to today. I'm sure if you had that explanation after, I'm just pulling a sect out of my ass, some evangelical who was reading, oh great, this is exactly the book for me, and then it was really subtle, maybe they wouldn't be like, oh, this isn't championing the Bible as I thought. And it's a much more subtle story about how these values lead him, I'm understanding.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I definitely had that concern writing the book. One of my biggest things that I was thinking as I was writing it is I go, this may be too religious for a non-believer and not religious enough for a believer, in quotes. So I'm like, I might alienate all of my audience here. I don't know.
From my perspective, I feel like that is most religious people. They fall under, yeah, they have these types of value. They hold these types of values, and they think a certain way. But when it comes down to, if you point out a certain line in the Bible, they're like, yeah, I don't believe that, or like, shellfish and wearing different types of linen and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's evolved. And a lot of when you were explaining how Thomas had kind of been distanced from his friends, and saying that he had grown up with these things, that actually reminds me a lot of my own experience growing up in the church. And I just wonder how you take that as someone who's written this character, a Christian character of not just Bible thumping or anything, but using the underlying subtleties of a godly mind frame to navigate good and evil, to someone who sees who says, hey, that also can go in the opposite direction. Is that even relevant to your story? Or I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yes, there's a lot of major themes, and I've broken them down into three. It's faith, family, and freedom. Those are my three main subjects that I deal with in The Price of Salvation. And this one, faith, is absolutely a huge theme of it. I definitely go some places that a lot of very religious people aren't going to like, because they're going to feel like probably attacked in a sense, because like I'll call out certain aspects. I'll give you an example. Okay, I'm going to be very vague because, again, spoilers, but I'll give you an example of the section that happens in the book. There's one of the main characters who is he is one of the actual true believers, right? He's got a good heart. He really believes it. He studies what he studies, and he's fully 100% on board. He really does believe it. And then he gets put in the situation where these other Christian believers who see this kid who needs help. He's a mess. He's dirty. He's full of gunk. He's been traveling for miles. Who knows how long? He's looking for help, and they start making fun of him. And our main character, this other main character that I have, he's like there, and he's like, well, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I was raised in this society. This is what I know. This is the culture I know. These are the people I know. So can I necessarily not join in? Because then I'll be alienated from my own people. So here you have a Christian who's worried of alienating himself from other Christians for not being Christians. And
yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to as well. Maybe not in the exact context, but just that thought.
Yeah, that mind frame.
Having their own doubts, and versus wanting to indulge in their faith and their community and all that kind of stuff. So that sounds really interesting. And so, what is it? What specifically is the obviously, without giving spoilers, when we have Thomas and we have the gang, and you're putting out the trailer, final trailer, we've got the teasers. All right, no spoilers. We're ready to watch this movie. What exactly is the A point, the conflict, and the obviously not the resolution, but what we want to find out from reading this?
Sure. Okay. So the A point would be the establishment of the world that we're living in, and what are the main three themes of faith, family, and freedom? I establish faith, family, and freedom all within like the first three chapters, and so that's the A point, is figuring out, okay, these three things are very important. To what exactly? What is the price of salvation? That's what it is. So A and C are directly connected in the sense that the price of salvation, what is it? How do we get it? What do we have to pay? What is it that you have to pay to get that? Well, family, faith, and freedom play a huge role in that. So then we have family, faith, and freedom, and Thomas and the brothers of Baudelaire, they go and they're going to meet with the guy who kind of sets up the conflict. And the guy who sets up the conflict, he basically offers them a deal, and he says, look, I know what you're going through. Times are getting tough. The government's cracking down on guys like you. You don't have much time left. If you want out, I'm rich enough. I have enough resources. I have enough ways to get you out. All you have to do is this. And what he tells them to do is to go out and kill every last one of the religious believers of the West that they're living in, and for the state of Arizona. That's where it comes into the last remaining Christians, because what ends up happening is this main antagonist, if you could call him that, he acts as this form of not retribution, but almost as I like want to call in a weird kind of a creepily termed way, like a cleansing, right? Because he sends out these brothers of Boudiclair, and he says, go do this for me and I will get you out. And all he asks them to do is go to some churches and take out everybody there. That's all I need. They're in my way. I don't want to deal with them.
Easy enough in the Wild West, right?
Exactly. Yeah, easy enough. It's not a hard job. You know, you've done it your whole life. You've been killing people left and right. What's the difference if you do it for me? And so Thomas is initially bothered by this because he realizes, well, we've never killed innocent people before. I've always at least been able to justify the people that I've killed for knowing I'm either doing it for my family, I'm doing it to keep my freedom, or I believe that I have faith enough in the things that I believed in my whole life to know that this is the only way that I can go about doing things that I've done. But I've never killed innocent people before. And he's so they're put in this situation, and so that's the initial conflict within Thomas. Is he's like, I don't know about that. That doesn't.
This is a whole nother level. This is a whole other thing. I didn't sign up for this. Gotcha.
Exactly. Even though he's been raised in it his whole life, he's like, this is something else entirely. Like I don't agree with this. And he does fight Lucius, who's his father figure, who's the guy that took him in since he was a kid. And he's like, we shouldn't be doing this. And Thomas is like Lucius's right-hand man, as well as like his kind of his pseudo son, because you know they found him at such a young age, and that's where the main conflict comes in, and we get to the main pinnacle point of what happens, and it is very dark. And the things that happen in this chapter, I think it's the fires will burn bright with the fires of Saints' fire, I think is the chapter, and it sounds fire, fire, fire. It's because there's a lot of fire and some very, very dark stuff happens in this.
Sounds pretty religious to me. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. You read the book of Revelations, you're there. No, but yeah, so it's a very pinnacle moment in the chapter, and what ends up happening just rattles Thomas to the core, and that's what ends up giving him the main conflict of like, well, I can't do this. Even though I've been raised in it, I cannot do this. I can't follow through with this. This is just such the pinnacle of evil that I can't follow through with it, but I have nowhere else to go. And so that's when he meets up with our other protagonists, and he's then in a very roundabout different kind of way, he's given the opportunity to take them and try and get them out of Arizona, because they are the last remaining targets that are needed to be killed to attain the brothers of Boudiclair's freedom. So he goes against his family. Yeah,
it sounds like there's a lot of through lines that, even though the times and the context of the story were very different, it's very applicable to the times today, and the whether it's the politics, your local politics or national politics or geopolitics. There's a lot of that stuff that comes down to what is the price of doing this. Like this whole thing with Biden finally pulling the troops out of Afghanistan, which is a good thing, but now the Taliban is just like I don't really know much about it, but apparently they could have done it better. I don't want to. That's neither here nor there, but apparently they could have done a lot better. And the Taliban is just taking over, which is like, that's what we've been trying to prevent for all this time. So what are we doing? And again, it's like, what was the price for going and doing all of this? Right. And then, I can think of a lot of things in our national politics just in the last 2 years about like, what is the price of what you're trying to accomplish, and whether it has to do with religion or whether it has to do with actually surviving and not dying, or continuing a certain way of life. I think that's a very powerful question. What is the price of and in this case salvation? But you can replace that for anything that's important to you, or anything that is anything that's necessary.
Absolutely. And that's really one of the main takeaways of my book as well. I would think that that would be the answer to your first question of ABC. What are we supposed to take away from this? Well, it's just that I wrote the book in this way. And I thought to myself, I don't want this to be just a book that's for Christian people who already believe in Christianity. I want this to be a book for people, and for all the people who come from different ways of life, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Bible thumping Christian, whether you're someone who's on the fence and you don't know what it is you want, this book is for you. And I wrote it that way because that's really that's what that's what the word of God is. It's not supposed to be for the people who are, oh, I'm holy and I have it all figured out and I never break a plate and I'm perfect. It's not for you. If you think that, then you're not really in it, because if you were in it and you were actually in what it is to serve God and what it is to give your life to the Lord truly, you would understand that it's hard and it's harsh and it's almost mean in some instances, and it can be
Definitely.
cruel to most people as from an outside perspective.
Yeah, I
And
mean, sorry to cut you off. Growing up Catholic, it definitely wasn't easy. And even when I first started, losing my faith and my journey to atheism, whatever you want to call it, there was a lot of anger there. There was a lot of that. I was that typical militant atheist who is like, got to shout from the rooftops that and then I realized I'm turning around and doing the exact same thing that I hate about, the thing that I claim to hate. When you step back, and as an atheist, there's endless things to criticize about religion in general, any particular religion. I could go all day, but to say that it is useless in the sense that people don't find use for it today, whether or not I think they should be believers, quote unquote, or actual believers, that I feel, or I have learned over time, is a little bit of a different conversation, because there is, there are people who really don't, they just don't understand atheism, and it becomes my job to show that, hey, we actually agree about a lot and hold a lot of the same values. It's just like when you get down to the nitty gritty, and it's like, okay, well, are we doing this because God said so? Are we doing this because we have humans have decided? That's the nitty gritty philosophical stuff. And meanwhile, a lot of atheist versus Christian stuff is getting into, oh, it says this about beating your slaves and this with your women and that's with that. And I don't think it's productive. It's actually something that, like I said, I was that typical militant atheist back in the day, and my parents are very Christian. And my mom, I don't know if we would be able to have the types of conversations, but me and my dad definitely get into it. And just because faith is such a personal thing, it was very hard to explain that that this is just what I believe, and the things that you've taught me, the values that you've given me, I haven't let go of. I'm just seeing them through a different prism. And what we actually started doing was watching clips of, I'm not sure if you've heard of this YouTube call-in show, The Atheist Experience. This guy, Matt Dillahunty, usually a co-host, theists will call in and just say, well, it's basically just, okay, what do you believe and why? And then they, try to prove it, and nobody ever does. Spoiler alert. But using other people's beliefs that, sometimes our own beliefs are so personal to us that we don't necessarily see how, we can't necessarily see them in the perspective of how someone else sees them. And when you get into the things that you can't explain, which there is probably a lot more than what we can explain, then you get into speculation on speculation on speculation. And for things like, okay, are there aliens? Well, we can use a lot of basic physical, scientifically based things to say, I don't know, but probably. I don't know, but probably. And then when it comes to things like, Jesus walking on water, well, that's a very different type of I don't know. And there's a much different reason to say, well, I don't necessarily believe that happened. But then again, coming back to what most people who I think call themselves Christians are those quote unquote believers, where they follow this as more of a philosophy rather than a strict dogma. I mean, the learning that has really separated the idea that having values and sticking so so closely to that value, those values don't have to be the same thing. And especially when you see in the political realm that there are people who have these values and they will stick to them, tooth and nail. Not like, when you bring up slavery to your average Christian, they're saying, yeah, of course I don't believe in that. But I think the TLDR is that what I'm getting is that the messages in your book are they have Christian undertones, religious undertones, but they're something that they're values that are universal in humanity. And again, while the story is set in a very specific time, the turn of the century in America, the choices and journey that the characters go through seem to be a lot more universal than what was written on the back of the book.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is why I'm like so bummed that the back of the book is as hard as it is. I'm definitely writing the next one myself. I'm going to write it all out myself. I'm going to make it sound good, and then the guy can copy and paste it. But to add on to what you said, absolutely. I think that as human beings and as humanity as a whole, the biggest thing that we're missing these days is respect. And it's respect for each and every person's individual beliefs. Because as a Christian myself, do I want to share the word of God with people? Absolutely. That's how I was raised. That's what I know. That's what I believe. Am I going to push it on people?
He froze there for a second. Did I lose him? Pause this.
Sweet.
All right, we lost you for a minute there, but as you were saying.
Right. So back to what was happening. So yeah, basic summary. I think nowadays a lot of times what people are missing is just the respect for each other's beliefs. And so we all come from different backgrounds, and we all come from different beliefs and ways that we want other people to see. But the fact of the matter is, like I was saying earlier, as a Christian, is my job to be like, well, yeah, do I want to share the word of God with people and tell them like what I know? Of course, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what the Bible tells me to do. Am I going to force it on people and be like, if you don't believe this way, then this and this and this, and like, there's one thing to have a call for repentance, and there's another thing to take the act of judgment into your hands and be like, I'm going to take God's spot and bring wrath upon these people. That's not right. And so my main point with all that is that in today's world, we just lack a lot of respect to understand everybody's going to come from their own walk of life. And the fact of the matter is, with God, you either believe in him or you don't. That's it. It's very simple. And if you don't, that's fine. That's okay.
I mean, I would disagree. I would just say I don't know. But if you held me to it and you asked me, do I have an affirmative belief in God? I would say no. So yeah, it is really that simple. And as a matter of, respect is hugely important. And this is what brought me away from that militant attitude is having respect for other people's beliefs, but not just blanket respect for people's beliefs. Some beliefs don't deserve respect. If you think that, slavery is, again, just to use the easy example, if you think slavery is good, I don't have to respect that belief. But there are a lot of beliefs that I may not agree with that are not in that category. And I think that is, again, living what we call what we've been calling the quote unquote believer type lifestyle, where you're just trying to be a good person, do, what you think is right and follow these values. I don't think there is any benefit to someone like me or anyone else coming in and saying, you're stupid, you're wrong, this or that. Same way, there's no point in anyone knocking on my door saying, do you want to talk about Jesus Christ? I know a lot about it because I grew up in it and it scarred me for life. So no, I don't want to talk about it. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation about other things. And seemingly from this conversation, it doesn't seem like I can't enjoy this book.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean,
for
this,
sure.
I mean, we've been going for almost an hour. If I'd love to ask some behind the scenes questions, just because I've always wanted to write a book. If you got some time.
Yeah, go for it. Sure, that's fine with
So
me.
I mean, you know, I've always been super opinionated, and while my opinions have changed over time, it's been a very clear evidence based thing since I have basically I guess since I started thinking about things critically. That was the basis for everything, and I, like I said, I was brought up religious, and then in taking more science and philosophy classes in college, it just brought me to a way of thinking of, okay, well, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a God, but I don't know. And if someone else claims to know, then I can't know that they don't know, but I'm just going to live according to what seems to be right. And there's a lot of things that I learned in church that don't really apply to whether there is a God or not. It's just about how you treat other people. And I think a lot of people who cling to religious language and religious tradition feel like the atheist is every atheist saying all together that you have to abandon all of that. And that's just not the case. I think much like most Christians are not the Bible thumping ones who believe every single line. I think most atheists are not the militant type. They're just the ones. So I have that happens not to be a part of my life. I decide what is valuable based on other things: human interaction, sentience, suffering, well-being, things like that. So point being, got a lot to say. I've always wanted to write a book. And so what got you to say, all right, I'm going to do this?
Well, so this is going to have a cup. This is actually going to be a bit of a winded response, but
Please,
I'll give you both. I'll give you the reason for the book existing and the reason why I chose to do it.
please.
So 2020 came around, and as we all know, that thing that decimated the planet arrived. I'm not going to say it because I don't know what platform you're going to put this on. I don't want you to get
I don't either.
tagged.
So yeah, let's.
Yeah. So I'm just going to keep it vague, but we all know what I'm
We all
talking
know.
about. And I was in my room, and I started going through a real hard time because of mental health and being away from people. But the most biggest issue was that I came to realize that I had a lot of things buried away that I got to hide because I was busy with my everyday life. And when you start to dig up those things, and you start to dig up that grave, and the rain starts pouring down and mud starts getting everywhere, and you start becoming a big disgusting mess, you start to realize that if I don't deal with this in some way, it's going to bury me. I'm digging my own grave. I'm not digging something
Absolutely.
out. I'm digging a grave for myself. And it did get to a very dark time. And if you read some of my poetry, I basically tell it word for word in those. But for this book, I started to deal with some of the things that I was discovering about myself, the way that I felt about my faith, some of the issues that I had growing up. And I guess if you're writing a book, the biggest thing that you can offer to the human race, or whoever reads your book, is this is my experience, this is my perspective, this is what I went through, and I'm going to put it in this story so that you can in some way either identify with it and be like, that's me, this person is speaking for me, like this is what I went through, and I see how this character conquered it, and that might just help me. And controversially, for someone who hasn't, they can go, wow, that's like wild that this person went through this and then overcame that, and now I have that in my head to know when I meet someone who is like this, now I know, hey, well, you know what, I do remember from this book that I read that this and this and this happened, right? And so then they can offer help to someone as well. And I feel like if you're going to write a book, that's the biggest thing. Like, what is it that you have to offer that's going to help somebody in the future? And so that was my initial inspiration for why do I do this? Why did I sit down at my Mac and go, I'm going to write for like literally 8 hours a day for a month straight? Why am I doing that? That was why. And of course, my faith played a huge aspect in that as well. And I did believe that there's a lot of good that's going to come from this book, and the way that I was led to create it. And so, but as far as the reason why the book exists and the characters and what they do, I'll say this because I feel like it'll be very interesting to you. and it kind of goes back to what you were just talking about. Thomas is not my only main character in the book. We have Paul Freeman, who is a Black Bible thumping Christian. So we have him too, and he's this really interesting character because he was born in this almost like a shelter in the West. Because bear in mind, this is 1902. Okay, a Black man in 1902 is not going to be treated well. I don't care where you are in the world, it's not going to be treated well. But he's raised in this bubble of Christianity and people that were accepting of him because of his dad. You know, his dad is a white man. His mom was a Black woman, and they came together and they had Paul. And so Paul is this he's this Bible thumping Christian. But then you have our third main character, who's Hope. I think it's Hope Homelight. I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. She is a Native American atheist. She actually doesn't believe in anything, and the reason for that being is because she has it. Yeah, you're like, hey, wait a minute. You're like, this guy is
my
not
girl. All right.
Yeah, and so these are the three perspectives that I found it very crucial to include, because I wanted it to be, so here you have this Bible thumping Christian, and he's raised in this little bubble of reality, and then he gets thrown into the real world, and he's like, what is this? You know, and his character arc develops over the next over this book, and then the next and the next. And so then you have Thomas, who's this middle of the ground guy who's just trying to figure it out, and he's like, well, this guy has got something, and I hear this. And then I have Hope here, and Hope and Thomas, they butt heads, and there's just these kids, Paul and Hope are both 16, and Thomas is about 21, 22, so he's really young too, but they're all just kind of butting heads because there's these crazy different characters. And Hope, she's this Native American woman who her tribe was ripped away from her at a young age, because if you understand Western history,
right,
they were not treated well either. The Native American people were in most cases just slaughtered because of government taking over lands, things like that. And then of course they got their territories later, but even those were, they were terrible. So that's what happens to her. She gets very brutal and just, ripping backstory. And so she can't believe in her Native American gods, because she's like, how could they let this happen to me? So she has the same scenario as any average Christian who's like, these horrible things have happened to me. I don't buy into it. I am my own person. I'm making it my own way. And she has very successfully. And she meets up with this other cast of characters. And so we have these three main perspectives of what I believe are the three main people in the world today.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's exact. As you were explaining it, I was like, okay, this seems to be like everyone kind of somewhat fits into either one of the categories.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of the book, is because here's the thing. If you read the book as an atheist, then you will see a story of triumph and overcoming and values and faith, family, and freedom. What is that? What is it to you? And if you read it through that lens, you're going to get that story. You're going to get, and it's still a beautiful story, because it's still the story of what do we pay to get our definition of salvation. If you read it from the perspective of Paul, who's a Christian, then and this is for any of the Christian audience out there that hears this, then you're going to see God through the whole story. But you have to believe it that way. You have to want to read the story that way, where you say, oh, you know what? I see God there. I see what happened there. That was it. And I do leave those little hints. I leave little hints that would be like, if you see it through that lens, you'll see it. Or maybe you're someone on the fence and you just don't know what. And that's really who this book is for. And that's when you see it through Thomas's lens. And you're like, I don't know, maybe not. Let's find out. Let's see what Thomas decides in the end. And that's how you go through his story, and you get to see how it plays out for him. And that's why the book exists. What is the price of salvation? Well, it determines on where you stand. And
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and either way, when you read the book, by the time you get to the end, you could read it on. And what I would encourage, honestly, is I would encourage reading it 3 times through each perspective.
Of course you would.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
that's a good idea. To be Hope, to be Thomas, and the other one was
Paul.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and so and that's what I would encourage, because if you do, it's very much written that way, to where you will see a different story every time, and you'll be able to put yourself in the shoes of these characters and be like, well, how did they react to this story? How did they react to this? How did they get to this? And I treat them each as their own individual characters, and they're both
That's
a
cool.
main
Now,
character.
now I'm a huge Game of Thrones fans. I haven't read the books because I refuse to start a book series that I don't know if it's going to finish. So if I get word that George R. Martin has at least written down the main points of the ending, then I'll start reading the books. But so that makes me think of, what I do know about those books is that each chapter, each section is from a different perspective. I don't know if that influenced you at all, if you're a fan at all.
I'll be honest, George R. R. Martin is a phenomenal writer. I just can't get into the books. I have a very, very short attention span because I have ADD to the maximum. And so if I read anything, it's got to be like boom, 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 because I'll get stuck.
Well,
so that
that is largely what started this whole show, man. I learned, before like school reading, I used to love reading fiction and Magic Treehouse and Animorphs. I used to love reading all that kind of stuff. And then they just would what's the fucking word? They would assign. There we go. They would assign these just very dry and I guess important books, but it wasn't in a way, it wasn't presented in a way that I could really sink my teeth into. And looking back, it's not because I wasn't smart enough to get to understand the classics. It's just because the class was taught in a very dry way, and it brought me away from reading for a long time. All these story after story, and now it's work and homework and book reports, and the reading for the story, it falls by the wayside. And now we're in a day and age of YouTube and podcasts and stuff like this. And I watch my YouTube stuff. I listen to podcasts at 2x speed. I spend most of my time in the car. I'm a dog trainer, so I'm driving all around New Jersey. And so I'll listen to hours and hours and hours of directly non-fictional content in a day, because it's just, oh, here's the thing, here's the thing, here's the thing, here's the thing. But if I find it very difficult to sink my teeth into a fictional story that's not in a book. Whereas I love movies, I love TV. I could go off all day about MCU and Game of Thrones and this and that. But for some reason, fictional books just it doesn't. I don't know. And so that's what I'm hoping. Getting you here, I could take a little shortcut and get the goodies straight from you.
Hey, and you know what? I'll give you some more good news for you about my book. So, this book was basically written for you. You just don't know it yet. Because when I started writing,
gonna have to take it. Have you done an audio book? That would definitely get me in.
Oh, I'm gonna do that next. That's like my next big project, but I have to do it all myself because I can't afford paying $40,000 to a voice actor.
Yeah, fuck that.
But I am going to record it myself, and I'm gonna do a really cool audio series on YouTube and just release it there.
That'd be great.
Or maybe even on Apple, like create an album there or something. But I am going to do that because I know that there's a lot of people who are like, ugh, reading, gross. But
it's just the attention economy these days. We're not built anymore for, and I guess we're built for it, but we've trained ourselves to just have the attention span of a goldfish. And if it doesn't keep you.
Here's the cool thing about the book is that where I was going with that is, so I wrote it with that in mind because I'm also that same person. And I've always told myself, if I ever wrote a book, I'm not going to spend hours being like, the lamp was black when the light came on and the wood was there and the table where wood lays in the middle of the East and the Southern Isles. And I'm like, that's not important. I respect authors who do it, but I don't like that. So when I wrote my books, it's very much, here's your meat, here's your potatoes, a little bit of gravy, have fun. And it is a nonstop thrill from the beginning to end. And that's what I open up with an action sequence. It takes no time to be like, here's your world and here's all the cool stuff. It's like, no, here's an action sequence. Things are going crazy.
Yeah. Which definitely does pay off, but it takes time. Yeah. It takes time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I'm definitely interested in this story and the series that you're talking about. Is this the first thing that you've published?
Yes, this will be the first thing that is published by me, and then I think I have a poetry book coming out later this year, which is a compilation of all the poems I've published on Instagram, and then there's a lot more projects I have coming, but this will be the first one.
Very cool. So I'm sure you will, anytime you put out something new, as my first guest, you always have an open invitation. Um, I just when you're like, all right, I'm gonna write this book. Did you have the story first and decide that you were gonna execute it, or did you just start writing and like figure out like, oh shit, I think I got something here?
Oh no, I absolutely had the story from the beginning. Remember earlier when I said that I started
Right.
out with this vision in my head? Well, I had originally turned that scene into a short film, and it's actually on YouTube right now. And I'm the star, but I'm not going to say much.
Assuming this is on YouTube eventually, that link will be in the description.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
awesome.
definitely. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. So it started out as a short film, right, 45 minutes long. And then I sat with that story for 2 years because I had it and I told it in the way that I could, which was in a short film. And I kept thinking to myself, this isn't the story. Like it is, it's beautiful. Like I love the short film version too, but I now see the short film version as like, this is reality one, the book is reality two, because this is what I wanted to tell initially. And so I sat with it for 2 years, just thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And I wasn't just thinking about this one, I was also thinking about the sequels that would follow up to it. So I had the whole story in mind. But after 2 years, and then 2020 hit, and I finally was like, it's ready, it's done.
Yeah.
Like I heard the little ding on the oven, and I was
Yep.
like, it's go time. And so I went for it. So yeah, I did have it.
Because like I ask, like I said, because writing a book is not only something that I want to do because I feel like I express myself best in prose. I need to. I can't. You can hear me stuttering, and I'm good enough at finding the words, but when I write, I really can express myself the way I want to. And so for that, and then also just being an author, if you're going to be a personality that's going to go on, this podcast or this show, or a podcaster versus author, it's different. It's a different stature. And so I look up to anyone who's had anything published. And I turn to podcasting similarly to the way I didn't have any clear vision I still don't really, for what I want to write about. I mean, I know I want it has something to do with the culture of politics and how the merging of the two has been bad and something around there, but it's a half-baked idea so far. And through the previous podcast I had, and hopefully through conversations like these with people like yourself, I would love to be able to be in a headspace where I feel comfortable saying like, okay, yeah, I can do this. But like right at this moment, when I think about like, I definitely want to write a book, but like, okay, write a book about what? Like, well, just like, I don't know, like things I think about stuff. That doesn't really sell
The
well.
thoughts that I have in my head, just throw them on the page.
And I mean, even to as proof of that process happening in real time, this show, I Didn't Read Your Book, is that reality 2 version of what the All Really podcast is, what my original podcast was called. And it was just me and my roommate. No, if Conover, you're watching this, no offense, it was just us shooting the shit, but it was just us being Joe Rogan wannabes. And I love that conversational thing. I love sitting down and not having a specific topic, but you've got to be somebody who people are willing to be like, all right, even if he's got nothing to say, what has he got to say? And I realized I didn't have that. And so now I've been, over time, I'm looking to focus more in. And now I have this message that's saying, hey, I understand, just like you, I don't really want to sit down and read every book that I hear about that might be interesting. But I am interested and I would like to learn. So, I mean, yeah, you've definitely gotten me super, super interested in this story. And I definitely, as you write the rest or have more ideas or just feel like coming on and chatting, you are, like I said, you have an open invitation. I want to thank you so much for coming out. Usually, see, that's my my podcasting. Usually, you'd be right here, but I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the platform and sharing with us. So, if you want to, anything else you want to add, where can people find you on social media? Where can people find the book? Where can people find your other works? The floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah. And first of all, thanks for having me on. I love doing these things. It's like one of my favorite stuff. I just love to like meet awesome people like you. You're great at what you do. Right. You obviously are a podcaster with experience, because I'm like, this guy, he's got it. He's ready. He's ready with questions.
Thank you. I didn't feel the same way, but I appreciate it.
No, it's good. I mean, I'll tell you this, my first interview scenario that I ever had was horrible, because it wasn't even an interview. It was like, hey, you have a lot of followers. I don't. I'm going to talk about myself while we do a live together. And I was like, oh, God. I wanted to pull my eyebrows out individually, but but anyway, yeah. Thank you for having me. You're great. And to those of you listening, my Instagram is actually John Anderson, and really what I post there is my poetry, which talks about different subjects. Of right now, we're talking about nature and the perspectives of nature. But if you want to get into the nitty gritty of my past life and all the horrible things that I was dealing with back in 2020, you can go back to the beginning of my page. All those poems are there. And that's really my only social media platform. But the book, as far as what I've been told, it will be available at doransbookstore.com, I think is what it's called. And also on Amazon, and it'll be an ebook as well. So basically, when it's ready, it will be out. They're just taking a while to get it out there. And yeah, got more cool stuff coming. I guess if I were to give an Easter egg, and this will be good for you too, because don't worry, the series does end, but this is the first book in a very interesting trilogy, and it does have an ending, so don't worry. I'm not going to pull a George R. Martin and be like, well, maybe there's more. No,
that's the only requirement.
Yeah, but if you read this book, if you journey into the west of Arizona and go into a simpler time with a very simple presentation, you can dive into some very interesting philosophical subjects, and it is its own story. So if you read The Price of Salvation and you stop there, you'll have a good time. You don't even have to read the rest, but if you do, you will be rewarded. And
awesome.
I think that's it, man. But yeah,
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Again, I'm just wanted to make sure we did this so that I have it. I don't know exactly how soon this will be out, but I will definitely contact you, get all relevant links and stuff. It's definitely going to be somewhere as a podcast. I'm hoping to do this on YouTube too, but that goes for everybody who is watching, which will be nobody except people in the future. Yeah, I'm a loser now. No. Thanks for coming, and this was great, and I can't wait to have you back.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. We'll be back soon.